Hello and welcome to the interview here on France24. Our guest today is the President of Bolivia, Evo Morales. Mr. President, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for your invitation to speak on France24.
Mr. President, in a couple of weeks, here in Paris, there will be a very important summit on climate change. The United Nations just announced that last year the level of greenhouse gases emissions reached a record level. Does this mean that an agreement in Paris here in a couple of weeks is absolutely mandatory?
As people of the world, we have great hope and great confidence in the presidents who will be meeting at the end of the month here in Paris. It's important that the governments of the states should listen to the peoples of the world. We cannot have another failure of a summit, because what is at stake is the life of humanity, and our obligation as citizens is to preserve the rights of Mother Earth. And we, not only those of human beings, but that of Mother Earth, we're convinced that the human beings cannot survive without Mother Earth. The reverse is true. The Earth can survive without the human being. Our obligation, if we wish to preserve life and humanity, we must agree and find projects and programs that will reduce global warming.
Do you feel that the big players, the United Nations, China, the European Union, are really listening to their people, or that they're under the influence of major industrial lobbies who want to defend themselves and do not want an ambitious agreement?
I have a feeling that in the United States of America, it isn't Obama nor his party who are governing. The United States is governed by multinational companies, corporations, the oil industry. On the contrary, when I listen to presidents in Europe, it's very different. They are trying to promote clean energy, to transfer it to countries that really need it. They talk about electricity transport, the hydraulic cars, and how to make sure that these clean sources of energy can replace fossil fuels. And this is a very different approach. So we need to agree among countries to prevent global warming.
You just mentioned President Barack Obama. In 1 year, his presidency will end. What's your judgment on Barack Obama? When he was elected, there was a lot of hope that he would defend minorities, that he would change something. He was even awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
He comes from a very humble social background. He was discriminated against. Like all the Afro-Americans, I come from a different social background. Specific to the history of Bolivia, I was discriminated against, politically oppressed, culturally alienated, the native movements. And I have had a lot of hope that with him we'd be able to develop programs and policies, not only for the poor of his country and mine, but for everybody. I hoped that we could develop good policies. On the other hand, it has been very difficult to have bilateral relations, diplomatic relations, commercial relations, to interact, to cooperate. It was very difficult, and that's why I'm convinced that in the United States, it's not the elected officials who govern, and the multinational companies do so. History will tell us, sooner or later, the peoples of America and those of North America in particular will realize that this situation is not a good thing. And I really believe in the peoples of the world.
Is Barack Obama a disappointment for the world?
Yes. Even though we had high hopes that he would end the embargo on Cuba, he had promised this.
But he did something important with Cuba, didn't he?
He has made a step forward, an important step forward, but his diplomats, when they had to vote on the economic embargo, they voted in favor again. They should have abstained, given the president's message.
At the United Nations.
Exactly. So how can we believe him?
You don't think Obama really wants to do something major with Cuba?
I want to believe that. But at this stage, I don't think it will happen. Let's hope. Let's hope I'm wrong. Let's keep hope. In America, on the American continent, there are still 4 or 5 major issues: the economic embargo, the Falkland Islands with Argentina, access to the sea for Bolivia, and the question of the FARC. And I would like to pay tribute to the efforts made by President Santos. This effort and the Cuban mediation.
We're very close to peace in Colombia.
We are very close to an agreement. I have hope. And I would like to say to my brothers of the FARC that we are not in a world of armed revolution, of fighting. We're in a world of conscience and democracy. I've talked to them, and I know that they're very receptive, and that's why I can feel that things are moving forward. And the other central issue is Cuba, and the relations between Cuba and the United States. 50 years of resistance by Cuba, they have never given up. And thanks to this resilience and to this anti-imperialist will, the Cuban people have won.
In those negotiations, in the talks with the FARC, the Pope Francis played a role. He's often called the Pope of the Poor. What is your judgment on him?
I, at last, have the impression that I have a Pope. Pope Francis. His policy is to defend the humiliated majorities of the world. Pope Francis, our brother, at the end of every week, he blesses us through his prayers in the Vatican, and I feel that we should also pray for the life of our brother, the Pope. And his interventions, very discreet interventions, have played a big role in America and in the world.
When you watch the situation in the Middle East, in Syria, in Iraq, with military interventions from the United States, from Russia, some people are talking about a new Cold War, potentially a new World War. Of course, for you, Bolivia, it seems far away, but do you fear there could be a new global conflict?
What's happening in Syria and elsewhere, initially, it was due to the United States, and it doesn't solve the problems of life, the social problems. And the continent that we call America mustn't suffer from aggressions and interventions, but we are subject to threats and economic threats such as vulture funds in Argentina and threats of aggression by opponents of to destabilize those countries. There are provocations, intimidations by the armed forces, the military forces of the United States, and it's not good for the region.
Last topic. In Bolivia, a referendum is supposed to be held in February to change the constitution and allow you to run again for president. Maybe for the last time. Some people think Evo Morales wants to revise the constitution to be president for life.
I say this in passing. I'm not the Pope. Do you understand me? I was surprised by this proposal by the social movements to change the civil society, to change the constitution.
You were really surprised.
It's not that I want to stay for life. I fled from the high plateaus. I went from the west to the east to survive. And then there was this opportunity.
Isn't it a danger for democracy in Bolivia?
I don't know. I don't know. I was recently studying the history of Germany. For example, thanks to political stability, the country developed. Before, in Bolivia, we didn't have political stability. And it was the country where there was the largest number of coups d'etat in the whole of the continent. And I remember an anecdote. When I was elected as the president, a former exiled person during the military regime told me, "President Evo, be careful of the U.S. embassy." The only country where there hasn't been a coup d'etat is the US, because there's no US embassy in the US. So they were conspiring already. We expelled them. We don't have a US ambassador in Bolivia, and we're more democratic. I would like to pay tribute to social movements that guarantee political stability. We have some disputes, minor disputes. This political stability guarantees the prosperity, the economic prosperity of a country, and it's a heritage. It's the main heritage of the social movements. And in addition, the people will decide if they want Evo to continue. They will change the constitution. If not, we will not go ahead. It's more democratic.
In conclusion, the Financial Times, which is the diary of so-called capitalism, describe you as the most successful socialist on earth.
I don't know. We have our own model.
Is it a socialist model?
Socialist and community-based. We respect private property, public investment, national and international. We respect the state property, which we have strengthened. The state participates in the national economy. We also support the joint collective property, which has enabled us to eradicate poverty. The only problem is it's not the North Americans who order us, it's the Indian Bolivians who run the country, and now we are happy. With the support of our intellectuals, we have defined our own model. We're no longer under a model imposed by the World Bank or the IMF.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you for watching this interview on France24.